Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bearded Gear podcast. This is episode number 18, and this is the first time since I started this podcast, since episode number one, that I've done this solo. I did episode number one solo, so first time since then, and I've had a guest every episode since then, and I would have this week, but I was traveling and got back into town late Tuesday night. Typically, I make my podcast go live on Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific, and that just wasn't in the cards this time. I should have recorded an extra one before leaving, but it got too crazy. So sue me. But yeah, I wanted to make sure I still got an episode up this week, and there are some things that I thought would be fun to talk about a little bit, just some things that have been going on that I'll kind of tackle solo. And then I also opened up on my Instagram stories for like an hour, just kind of an ask me anything, and waited until I got like at least 10 responses, and then I pulled it down. It might be just over 10. So I've got some questions from people on Instagram that I'll be kind of going through one by one and answering as well, which should be a little bit of fun. But just going to talk about a couple of things today. We'll be going over the swish Bowie, the Spyderco Swish Bowie Knife Joy exclusive drop. Just kind of talking through some general thoughts on there. That's a hot button thing right now. And then I want to talk a little bit about Tactile Knife Co. I've got the Rockwall right now. And then I'm going to talk about the haptic because I just traded it tonight. So I'm going to talk about that Holt haptic a little bit. And yeah, beyond that, I'll be answering those questions, and we'll see. Knowing me, I may also get off into the weeds a little bit and ramble about some things. But yeah, so we're just going to kind of go through all of those topics today and just hopefully have some fun talking through each of those topics. Yeah. So without further ado, let's start with the Swish Bowie drop. I reviewed the Spyderco Swish Bowie, the original one, just a couple of months ago. And it wasn't what I would call a full review because it was a loaner. It wasn't a knife that I purchased for myself. So since it wasn't mine and I didn't own it, I didn't feel comfortable talking about it from experience, especially because it was a loaner that I wasn't supposed to like carry and cut with. I think the guy would have been all right with me putting it in pocket, but it was in very good, like new condition, and he was planning on selling it after giving me the chance to review it. So I didn't want to put any wear on it, and I didn't. The only time I put it in my pocket was just literally to like test how it went in and out of pocket on one pair of pants. But other than that, it sat on my desk, and when I spend time at my desk editing or whatever I was doing, I would fidget with it a decent bit. I played with it and felt it in hand a lot, but it never cut anything. I never carried it out of the house with me or anything like that. So my review was a review in the sense that I played with it quite a bit, and I was talking about it while it was in hand. But in my typical reviews, I like to be very sure that I don't do the full review until I've had enough experience with the knife being the object to speak about it from experience, so that I feel comfortable enough about it that if someone were to press me on anything that I say about it, that I can back that up with, that's actually what I found in my own use. I don't know. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to say I am, but that's typically my process. Anyway, I did a review, but it wasn't really a full review. But in that review, I just rewatched it 2 days ago, something like that. I'm recording this on Thursday. I believe the Swish drop was on Tuesday. And it was funny because for a couple of days before the drop, I had noticed all of a sudden I was getting comments on that video again, which is kind of an older video. And so usually when that happens, it's because there's a drop happening or something has gone on to bring that to the front of people's brains. And so, yeah, I knew that that knife was coming. To be totally transparent, I knew about it for probably a little longer than most people, just because I'm deep into Spyderco and I talk to some people in that world. I don't always know everything that's going on there, but I happened to know that that was coming. And in my review of the knife, I had only heard rumors previously that there would be another Swish coming or another Bowie coming. And I thought that was kind of an exciting idea because, and I'm probably going to, in my upcoming Bowie videos because I bought one on the drop. I'm going to be sharing a lot of this stuff again, I'm sure. But I thought it was exciting, the idea of another one coming, because secondary prices had gotten crazy on the original Swish Bowie, like double what it originally retailed for, which for me kind of priced me out of it for the most part. There was a while where I was really considering getting one. In fact, when I got offered the one to borrow to review, and the guy mentioned he was going to sell it, I almost just bought it from him rather than bringing it in as a loaner. But I was like, no, I'll bring it in as a loaner. And then if I love it, I'll just pay him for it and keep it. I'm really glad I went that route and didn't just buy it, because that saved me from having to then go and resell it when I realized I didn't really want it for how much it was costing. But yeah, I just, there were, not only was the price kind of out of whack, but by the time I actually got it in hand, I pretty quickly realized that for me, it was not the ideal knife. And so I think it's a little bit funny that the terminology for this knife, or all of the like teasers about it, were the GOAT, like GOAT, greatest of all time. But everyone was using the GOAT emoji, and some of my friends were the people who were doing that. And it's fair for other people to have different favorites than me, but I most certainly would not consider the Swish Bowie personally to be the greatest of all time at anything. I don't love the knife. At least I didn't with the first one that I reviewed. But I felt like I didn't want to miss this next one coming out. So I was ready on drop morning. It took me like a whole 12 minutes. I'm surprised that I was able to get one. I think I had to have been one of the last few. But the site was crashing. We can talk about that too. But it was a whole thing. And I finally got checked out with one. And part of it, sure, was absolutely FOMO with pretty much any knife drop. That's going to be a component of it, I think. It's just like, if I miss out, then I might not have a chance forever. And then if I decide I want one, I'll have to pay more. And like, there's all these fears that go into it. But I got one. And really the thought process for me was, and I had just rewatched my own review. I wanted to make sure I kind of picked up where I left off on it. I had said in that review that if more came out, it would be compelling at drop pricing to have one and to see if I felt that it was worth it. And so the drop price went up, which made a lot of people mad. There's been some, frankly, pretty funny memes about how basically, in essence, before the drop happened, everyone was complaining that it was too expensive, that because it was $400 now new, that it was that was too much for what that knife is. And then after the drop, everyone was complaining that there weren't enough of them and that they couldn't get one. It's like, it's just people find a way to complain about the drop. And I'm sure if I hadn't gotten one, I might have a slightly different tone right now. Although as I was trying on the drop, I was fully expecting to not get one, especially when it was crashing constantly. But anyway, in that review, I'd said at retail price, I would do it. And so I wanted to get one at retail price, even though it was more this time. And I was especially intrigued because it's an M390 now, which I would say is superior for my use case on a knife like that to XHP. Spyderco tends to do a good job on their M390 as well. So I would say that's an upgrade. It also has anodizing, which typically on Spyderco models, when there's a plain version and an anodized version, those are a little more expensive. Plus, it's been some time since the Swish first came out. So I don't want to sound like I'm defending that knife should be $400, but I see how they got there. Like, I don't think Knife Joy was doing some crazy cash grab any more than on any other Sprinter exclusive. And you're playing with a higher price item to start with, and then you're adding more in material cost. And since the time that knife originally came out, I want to say they were in like the low 300s, maybe 320, 330 retail, something like that, when they were originally on the market years ago. If you look at Spyderco's models in general, the price hikes percentage-wise have been not like drastic, but they've been noticeable, right? A PM2 back in the day used to cost something like $120, and now for like fairly basic versions, it's like 160. So that's a pretty big increase in and of itself. So the fact that it's an altered version, it has M390, it's anodized. I guess that's really it on differences. The blade finish is arguably less nice That's another thing to consider as well. A lot of people love on the Bowie and on a few of Spyderco's models. Like they do it on the Drunken. I think they do it on the Positron, oddly enough. It's probably on the Swish Swayback, which I have no interest in because it cannot possibly be Spidey flicked. And that's why I like Spyderco knives most of the time. Anyway, they do that like mirrored, then stone washed finish on a lot of those nice Taichung knives. The Paysan probably has it as well, although now in this moment I don't remember. But yeah, so now this new one is M390 with belt satin, which to a lot of people, that's a step down. And I can see that. I do think it looks less nice. I would say for me personally, I'd prefer the belt satin. I like belt satin a lot as a finish. I genuinely do. And if I'm going to end up keeping the Bowie, then I'm going to want it to be a user knife for me. It's going to have to be a knife that I'm willing to put in my pocket to carry and cut with. And I feel more comfortable doing hard use with belt satin than I do with the mirrored stone wash. I just feel like, I don't know, the type of cutting I will do with that knife, a lot of putting it through cardboard and stuff, realistically, that finish I trust a little more to stand up and not look terrible pretty quickly. But I don't have a ton of experience with the other finish, to be fair. So anyway, it's an interesting thing because in the last few days, I've observed a lot of, first, anger about the price, and then second, butthurt about missing out, and just a lot of people thinking that they have a solution to it. And I find it a little comical at this point. Like there's people who are so mad about the idea of somebody having bought that knife with the intent of reselling it for more money, not even planning to keep it or give it a try or anything. They realized, hey, this knife is coming out. It's a very safe bet that it will be more expensive the day I get it. If I'm able to pay $400 now, I can get, I don't know, 500, 600, whatever it is, right after. That's, I'm sure, going to happen. And is that frustrating when you're somebody who's trying to get one because you want the knife and then you miss it? Of course. But the people who like jump in a Facebook group or put on their Instagram or in their stories or whatever, like that they're just yelling, frankly, digitally, about how mad they are about that and how everyone needs to get on board with blah, 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 blah. Like, save it at this point. I'm sorry. I get it. It's frustrating. I've been the one who's missed out. I understand that, but shut up. Like I just don't have much sympathy for the people who like cry about it so much. And here I am crying about them in a way, but it's hilarious to me how worked up people get about it. And I don't know. I don't see a way around it. The only thing that I will say is just operate the way you want others to, like treat others as you want to be treated, whatever. Like if you don't like that there are scalpers, then don't feed the scalpers. Don't pay somebody $600 for a knife that was $400 brand new 2 days ago. Unless it's worth it to you, then do it. I mean, there will be buyers who are willing to pay that price for the knife. And so the sellers, of course, will sell it for that amount. And I think there's this weird misconception that, at least the way I perceive it, some people think that it's the sellers who are determining secondary market prices. And in the majority of cases, that's not what's happening. The only time when something like that happens is when somebody has something so ultra rare that they're the only one with one available and a bunch of people want it. And so they can basically ask, up to an extent, anything that they want for it because there's no competition, right? But when there's a lot of something hitting the market, I don't know exactly how many of this Bowie were made, but let's say it was minimum 1,000, maybe it was 2,000 or 3,000 tops in this run. It sold out pretty quick and it was expensive, but I think, yeah, for simple math, let's say it's 2,000 or whatever, right? If 1,000 of those don't stick with the person who originally bought them and they're being sold, I don't know. That's probably not how many it'll actually be. But let's just say there's 1,000 that are going to be changing hands now in the next couple of weeks. Um, you're powerless. You're powerless to set the price as any one individual in terms of what they'll go for on the secondary. The 400 thing is over. That's not going to happen because they've all been sold out. It happened fast, and a lot of people missed out. And some of those people are really going to want one. Some of those people are collectors who feel the need to have one. They don't feel like their collection is complete unless they do. And whatever those people are willing to pay is going to be the secondary price. And so my best recommendation is, if that bothers you, then don't participate in it. I personally very, very, very rarely pay more on the secondary for something than it can be had new, because I'd rather be patient. I'd rather just buy other things in the meantime until I get a shot to get one, or I'd rather just deal with the fact that I missed it and get over it. And sometimes it's harder than others if you're really excited for something. When I missed the last OZ Rose or Oz, I never know how to say that. It's either OZ Machine Company or Oz Machine Company. I assume it's probably Oz because his last name is Osborne. Anyways, when I missed the book's opening the last time, I was real salty, of course. But that didn't mean that I was going and looking on the secondary and paying $1,500 for a $500 knife. I refuse. I won't do it. That's not worth it to me. And so just do what's worth it to you. And then the other thing you can do is create a pool of friends around you who participate in drops like these. And maybe one of your friends will get one thinking he's going to like the knife. And then they decide they ultimately don't. And they're willing to sell it to you for a homie price because you're a homie. And that's cool too. I've made a ton of friends in the knife community over the last few years. And a lot of it takes time to build relationships with people, but I'm in group chats with a number of people on Instagram, and I'm in groups with people on Facebook that I'm close with, and I talk to people in the knife community all the time. Does that mean I can count on somebody getting one for me? No, but it certainly helps, and it has happened a lot where I've missed something that I've wanted, and like a week later, one of my buddies who got one is willing to let it go, and because it's to me, he's just going to charge me what he paid plus shipping, when other people are charging way more for the object. And like, that's a real thing that happens too. So I just think people should learn to be more constructive with their own behavior instead of going in a Facebook group and pouting and trying to dogpile on a situation. Just talk to your friends, go on a walk, go on a hike, like move on with your day. Be glad that you were in the situation where you were able to spend $400 on a luxury item, and realize that it doesn't really affect your well-being, that you didn't get it. And if it does, it's only because you're making it affect your well-being. And if it's important enough to you to have that object, then pony up and be the person who pays more on the secondary, because that's how you get it. And that's just unavoidably at the moment the way that the market works. I'm not even trying to say that I wouldn't like for that to change eventually, but I don't think that Pandora's box can be closed on that. I think that there are too many buyers for a relatively limited number of items. And even then, let's go down that rabbit hole too. Some people choose to be mad at KnifeJoy for not ordering enough of the knife. First of all, KnifeJoy has said that there will be subsequent runs, possibly in multiple variations. So maybe the next one won't be blue with M390. Maybe it'll be bronze and it'll have the mirror stonewash again or something. I'm not saying, don't take this as me. I don't know anything about what next runs of this knife will be. Maybe it'll just be more of this blue one. I don't know, but they've said there will be more. And you also have to understand that if you're a business like KnifeJoy, KnifeJoy is not huge. KnifeJoy is not Blade HQ. They're not Knife Center. They're not Smoky Mountain Knife Works. And even those businesses, in comparison to businesses in some other industries, are really quite small. But KnifeJoy isn't one of the giant players. They've been growing, which I love to see because I like the guys over there. The interactions I have with them are very positive, and they're cool. And they've been pretty supportive to me in my endeavors as a channel as well. So I like those guys over there. But imagine that for them, they put in an order for, say it was 2,000 of the Swish buoy. If it retails for 400, I don't know what their cost is as a dealer. Maybe 300, maybe it's less than that. I don't know. Um, and I'm not just like trying to be facetious. I genuinely don't know what their cost would be on a model like that comes from Taichung. It's a collaboration piece already for Spyderco, so some money has to go, I would imagine, licensing wise, to Marcin Swish. So I don't know, but imagine they have to pay $300 to get those knives in hand. That kind of thing takes forever with Spyderco. And you can say it's a pretty sure bet that they're going to sell all of those knives when they get them and are able to sell them. But guess what? They had to put up a lot of money in the meantime for months and months, maybe a year plus, maybe 2 years. They've been planning on doing this exclusive of the Bowie. And in the meantime, that whole waiting period, Spyderco has had some of their money. And then eventually they had to pay all of it before they even sold these things. And so if you're a smallish business and you're ordering 2,000 of something at $300 a piece, that is not cheap at all. And that means that's other inventory that you can't have on your shelves. That's other exclusives that you can't be making in the meantime. That might be faster to accomplish or something. I don't know, but it's a hurdle monetarily to do projects like this. And I don't know. I think you could maybe start to say like, well, Spyderco, if they know this model is so sought after, why don't they just make more of the original version and just pump out more of that unit? Sure, I would like to see that, but Spyderco also has plans for other things that they would like to make, and to them, it may not be that worth it to keep pumping out old models when they'd rather keep trying new things, right? They don't seem to be having major problems at Spyderco with not selling out of the new stuff that they try, and so that's probably more exciting to them. I don't know. There's a lot of kind of unknowables for me sitting on the consumer end of the equation, but there are things I can grasp as well. And so I think when people out of frustration are like, well, Knifejoy should have ordered 10,000 of these so that everyone who wanted one could just get one. And there could be some left over for people who decide they want one in 6 months. It's like, Knifejoy doesn't want to deal with that inventory. I'm sure they had a great day on drop day when they were able to have the climax of all of the money that they'd invested in this project pay off in 12 or 13 minutes, however long it took for that drop to finally go through, with the site throttling everybody who was trying. I imagine if the site hadn't been having any of those issues, which it had to be thousands and thousands of people all at the same time hitting F5 like I was. I imagine if that hadn't happened, the drop probably would have lasted, I don't know, a minute, maybe, like if everything just went smooth. Because I know a lot of people also who were trying, just like I was, and just didn't get lucky, because for them, they weren't able to get it through. And it took a lot of tries for me, and I was battling it the whole way through. And it took until the bitter end, but I got it. And then I got a shipping notification, so I knew it was real. And like, that's great. It's actually also supposed to arrive tomorrow, which is kind of a bummer because I'm going to be at Disneyland all day long, and it's a signature required. So I have to put it in on the UPS app or whatever, that I won't be here, so it'll deliver it on Saturday. Anyway, I don't remember where I was going with that. The drop. Oh yeah, the climax for Knifejoy. This is the danger of doing it solo. I don't have somebody else to make sure that I don't forget what I'm saying. How good must it have felt if you're Knifejoy in that moment, and you've had months and months and months of money being on the line, and been hoping that, even though you know this is a wildly popular model for Spyderco and a ton of people want them, and they're going for a lot on the secondary, which is a good indicator that if more come out, people will buy them. How good must it have felt to just have them all sell immediately? And knowing Spyderco, the minimum that it could have been was probably something like 1,200 units, but I'd bet it was more than that. I mean, I don't know. So financially, that was a big undertaking for them, and it was a win. And they've already said that they plan to do more. At least in Nick Shabaz's video, he said that they said that. so I shouldn't say that I know they've said that because I haven't heard it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. But anyway, I think ultimately the thing went about as smoothly as could be expected when, like, the night before the drop, Nick Shabazz posts a follow-up review, and he's the person who many say is to blame for the drastic rise in popularity for that knife to begin with, for it becoming so coveted. Before his reviews of that knife, it wasn't so much the case. So he puts up his review follow-up saying the drop time the night before. A ton of people have been waiting for a long time. There's already a ton of discussion around it, partially because of the pricing and the changes to the model. So all of that drove more awareness for it. So there were a ton of people waiting for it. And I think, considering all of that, it went about as smoothly as it could have. And I feel like Spyderco is oftentimes at the center of this conversation of sprints and exclusives and crazy drops and stuff like that. They're not the only one who functions that way. But I personally genuinely think it's really cool that a company with production numbers like Spyderco plays the game where they let their dealers do these exclusives and stuff. Because when you think about it, like, River's Edge Cutlery is one of my absolute favorite knife retailers. I order from River's Edge Cutlery all the time. I talk about them all the time, and I try to help them because I like them. And they help my channel a lot as well, which is meaningful to me. But I wouldn't know who River's Edge Cutlery was if it wasn't for Spyderco exclusives. And the way that I found out about them was that original Para 3 rec exclusive, which I missed out on, and I was real salty about. But I couldn't really also hold it against them at the end of the day. Like, they did the best that they could with the limited number of units that they had, and I just missed it. And it was a bummer, and I was upset. But at the end of the day, I learned who they were. I started following a new retailer. I started learning that there were cool guys over there. And then eventually, it was like something I was looking for was on stock there. And then I did order something from them. And then flash forward to now, they've done a number of exclusives that I've been all about, and they're great. And I really like them. I think Knifejoy might have also been kind of the same type of situation. It might have been one of their exclusives that brought them into my field of view. And it's not that I dislike the bigger retailers per se. I don't necessarily have things against the bigger retailers. I have had a splotchy video history with Blade HQ when customer service was not that great. That's its whole own story. But in general, those bigger retailers have been fine to me. But I don't find that they're as pleasant to order from and deal with as the little guys like Knifejoy and River's Edge Cutlery, where, like, I know the people's names over there a lot of the time, and they communicate with me when I communicate with them. And it's not like I'm just talking to some generic customer service person. I'm talking to, like, the owner or one of the owners, or, like, also Cutlery Shop. Jeff over there is the owner, and I talk to Jeff somewhat regularly, and he's one of the nicest guys, and he's awesome. And he's also super supportive of my channel. And, like, I get a totally different sense when I deal with those smaller dealers. And so I love that Spyderco exclusives exist. Not even just sprint runs, but exclusives, which is a big difference. That means only the one dealer can have it, because it gives these dealers a chance to gain some exposure. And it can, if it goes well, be a big influx of cash for them and capital that they can invest in more inventory for their store and all of that good stuff, which I always want to see. You know, I want there to be more exciting knives for me to have the option to buy. And so Spyderco exclusives are fuel for that fire. And it can be a frustrating game if you're on the losing end of it, but it can also be really exciting. I would argue more exciting when you do win in that game of getting one, because there are stakes, right? If it's just easy to get that knife every time, then there's no, like, thrill of getting it. And if that doesn't sound alluring to you, or you don't like those rules of those games or whatever, then just don't play. Collect something else. Like, buy off-the-shelf versions, but stop whining. Like, And I made a video a while back about Spyderco sprints and exclusives, and in the title it was "Stop Whining," because I don't agree with it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to hop in comment sections and be combative with everybody who is whining while they're doing it, because I think that also just adds fuel to the fire that I don't want to be burning. I would rather just accept from my perspective, especially now as a moderator in the Millie Club, that it's going to happen. Anytime there's a big drop that people are worried about, that for a couple of days after, comment sections are going to be crazy. There's going to be people making very whiny posts that they'll probably feel bad about later, because when their emotions aren't high, they'll realize it was little of them to berate a retailer for having a drop that they missed out on. Like, that kind of stuff is just silly to me, but it's going to happen. And so I just have to let it go too. And I think people just they're way too fired up about things that ultimately just shouldn't matter that much. And I get it that it stings when it happens. It's happened to me plenty of times, but just like, be an adult, you know? Anyway, so I think that's about everything I wanted to say about that. It took me like a half hour. So hopefully, so let's talk a couple other things that have been kind of going on. I wrote down notes to make sure I talked about Tactile Knife Co. and trading the haptic. So let's do Tactile Knife Co. first. On my trip to Utah this last week, I was having a kind of fun conversation with my buddy, my friend Keith, that we rented a Verbo up there, basically an Airbnb, if you're not familiar with what a Verbo is. And we stayed with some of our friends who used to live down here. They've since moved up there. And it's kind of the reason for the trip was to hang out with these family friends of ours. And so my buddy Keith, when he lived down here, we would hike together all the time. And I got him like a cold steel drop forged fixed blade at one point, those 52-100, pretty decent like outdoor fixed blades because they're pretty economical. I cord wrapped the handle for him, and he likes that knife, but he's not like a knife guy. And on this trip, I also, one of my buddies was selling a Civivi Elementum right before I went. And so I bought that from a buddy for pretty cheap, frankly, and gave him that because he doesn't have a decent folder to carry. And so I've been just kind of like giving him a couple of knives here and there, but he's well aware of what I do and how ridiculously into knives that I am. And he's cool about it though. He finds it entertaining, and so he wants to see the new knives I've been getting. He watches some of my videos, and anytime that I see him, he wants to like handle all my knives. This time he cut himself pretty good too, which made it even more entertaining. But anyway, we stayed up pretty late every night. There's a hot tub, and so we would hang out in the hot tub until 2-3 a.m. Then we'd come inside and hang out and keep talking for a little while longer. But one of the nights we were talking about a lot of things about knives, and I brought up that I had just gotten this knife that I was pretty excited about because it's US made. It's coming in at about $300 in really nice, well-machined titanium, fully built in-house by these people in the US. It's using XHP blade steel, which I think is pretty good at that price point, considering the work that they're putting in on these knives. And it's packaged well, and it's made by this company that already seems to have a pretty good amount of respect in their like pens division. And now they've made this split and they're making knives too. And so I was explaining it to him, and to him, $300 is still really, really expensive for a knife, right? It probably should be to everybody, but it's all relative at a certain point, right? And so we're talking about it, and I was expressing why I think that's such a good deal. And so I kind of went down in the weeds with him. And granted, I'm pretty biased about this at this point. I've done a whole 3+ hour podcast on why I think Chris Reeve knives should probably stop saying that they're cutting edge, because I don't think they are at all. I think they're very far behind. But anyways, so I went down in the weeds with him about Chris Reeve, Hinderer, and Strider, and tried to frame it in a way that would make it fairly simple for somebody who's not like in this community to understand. But basically, the way I phrased it was that these 3 companies for the last while have been considered kind of the big 3 in the US. They kind of compete with each other, but not so directly. And they all price their knives at around the $450 mark. And most of them kind of have stayed there, or maybe even increased a little. I guess you could say the small Sebenza is a little less than that, which is the size of the Tactile Knife Co. Rockwall. But in general, these knives from these companies are more expensive than this new one from Tactile Knife Co. is. And they, from my perspective, have not done a good job at keeping up with the times. Although I think you could argue that Hinderer has, and I talked about that in that Chris Reeve focused podcast. I think Hinderer, with the advent of the tri-way pivot, with the new models that they've come out with over time, like the Eclipse and the FireTac, and they don't just make the XM18 3.5 inch. You know, they make a variety of models. There's the half track and the full track, and they do quite a bit over there, and they use more modern blade steels. Strider seems to play with steels a little bit, but really they're making the same knives that they have all along, and they kind of refuse to make anything else, which again, it's fine. But I don't see that when I look at any of those brands that I perceive much value the way that I think about value. And I just think it's cool that Tactile Knife Co. is kind of bursting onto the scene with this new model that I just got one of. And they are seemingly, I would say, doing more for less, in the sense that you're getting premium materials. You're getting, frankly, really very cool machining. Like if you look at the scales of the Rockwall, it's different the way that they've kind of micro milled, or whatever you want to call it. It's beautiful to look at. It's nice to hold on to. The knife is simple enough that it's not going to be super alienating, I don't think, to anybody. I don't think anyone looks at it and they're like, oh, it looks so, anything. It looks fairly simple, but it's got a lot of little details on it that actually make it pretty unique, and I'm sure complex to make. And they're at like $300 with really cool packaging, nice branding, and good materials. And like all those things wrap in to make it pretty compelling to me. And so I was explaining this to my buddy, and it was interesting to hear his comments about it, and insightful for me to try to grasp what somebody from the outside would say about these things. But then the update now is, so I got the Rockwall kind of with the hope that it would almost prove a point that I've like been trying to make, maybe to myself, or maybe by talking about these things kind of a lot, that it's possible in the US for somebody to step up and to create a really good product using good materials, and to not charge too much for it. And I'm sure a ton of people will be real upset at that, because they don't see Chris Reeve knives as charging too much, or Hinderer or Strider. And I think in some cases they probably aren't so much charging too much, and that's all relative. But for somebody to come in and try to hit a price point that's at least quite competitive, when the other brands in the same sphere seem to have agreed upon this range. And like if Hinderer started offering the XM18 at $300, and Strider started offering the S&G at $300, and they were making a lot more of them, so they were actually pretty available, at least Strider. Hinderers are fairly widely available, but if Strider and Hinderer started making more knives and offering their core models at $300, the Sebenza would be $300 then. I could pretty confidently assume, personally, that would probably happen. I think that to stay competitive within that realm, if one of them came down significantly on price, that the others would feel a need to follow suit. Maybe not immediately, maybe they could hang on for a little bit, but I think if the XM18 is a $300 knife and not a $450 knife, then the Sebenza is not a $450 knife either. I don't see that. I don't know. I think that would change the perception of the value for each of them. And so I'm excited about the idea that there's an American player making stuff in America, with American materials, an American staff, American machines. They're in Texas, You could probably even argue that it's more American than Idaho or Ohio. I don't know. That's probably controversial, but it's not like I'm a huge Texas guy anyways. I've been to Dallas once when I was a teenager. Anyway, I just think it's an exciting concept. And then, so tonight I sent a message to Tactile Knife Co. on their Instagram because they'd made a post talking about how they were super grateful for the like early adopters of that knife who bought one without any, like, not only never handling one, but without like anybody that they trust even handling one yet. Because the first few people to get something, it's like there's not a lot of reviews out there to watch. There's not that much information you can get other than the company who makes it saying that it's nice. And so they were appreciative of that kind of leap of faith that some of the early people took. And then they were also expressing that now that they're getting higher in the numbers, they've been figuring things out, which is not only totally fair, but I appreciate them saying that, hey, the first few we made aren't as good as the ones we're making now. Like, how many prototypes would they have made before they started selling some? Probably not an insane amount, not hundreds, like it's probably a few to figure out, yeah, we can make this thing and it works and it's pretty good. But then as they keep cranking them out, they've been able to make little tweaks and figure some things out even more. And they were like, now it's even snappier. The action is better, blah, 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 blah. Like, these advancements have been made, and they're open about that. So I really, really like that. And I DM'd them and I was like, hey, first of all, I appreciate that you put my unboxing video in your email blast today, because they did. And that was kind of cool to see. I literally didn't even notice that. I hadn't opened that email blast, and then somebody sent it to me and I was like, oh, that's rad. So I said, thank you for that. And then I was like, and so I got a book spot. You were able to sign up with your email address for a book spot. This was like, I don't know, 2 months ago or something that I signed up for it. It was like the day that they publicly opened them, I think. And I thought I was in like the 800s, but then at some point they switched servers, and I guess the numbers had been slightly off. So I looked at the email and it said my number now was 918, which they're doing like 50 of them a week. And right now, as of today, I think they made like 750 of them already. So that's only a couple weeks out, right? But so I messaged the guy and I'm like, hey dude, so appreciate that you put me in your newsletter thing. That was really, really cool of you. And then I also wanted to ask, so I have knife number 95 that I bought on the secondary. It's in great shape. Like, everything's cool with the knife. But the detent is lighter than I personally prefer. That's really, at this moment, the only gripe I've been able to find with the knife, other than maybe the clip for my hand is a tiny bit hot spotty, but not even like the point of the clip. Anyways, I'll talk about that in my review. But I mentioned that, and I was like, I know in that post you made that you'd verbalized that the action had been kind of tweaked a little bit. I was like, is that the case? Like, should I expect that it's going to be different? Because if so, I'm probably going to resell this one that I bought, and then I'll get number 918 when my spot comes up. But the bummer is the one I have apparently has special packaging that they're not going to be using anymore once they get past that first kind of wave. And I think knife number 918 won't have that special packaging. So I was like, I'd love to keep the lower number. I think that's cool, especially with all this like special stuff it came with. The box it came in is cool, and it's like magnetic. I think they said it's micarta, which I didn't even realize. And the guy responded and he was like, hey dude, yeah, the detent is much crisper now. He's like, instead of you having to deal with all of that, why don't I send you a return label and you send that knife to me, number 95, and we'll update it to the way that we're doing it now for free, and we'll send it right back to you. And I was like, that's freaking legit. I don't know if any of that was because I sent that from Bearded Gear and they had just put my video in their email today. Not that I'm big time or anything like that, but maybe there was some element of this guy's going to talk about us on the internet. But here I am doing it. I think that was really cool that they were like, yep, you've got one of our early ones and we are doing it a little bit better now. So send it in to us and we'll just update it. They're going to basically retrofit it with whatever they're doing new for their detent now. And I'm going to have one that's as crisp as the brand new ones coming out, which will make that knife better for me. I'm going to enjoy it more now. I can say with confidence because again, that's to me like one of the very few weak points of the knife is that the detent is softer than I prefer. So just really, really cool of them that they're doing that. So yeah, tomorrow they're sending me a label. On Saturday, I'm getting it in the mail back to them. I don't know how long it'll take. It's probably going to make my review take a while longer, but my review is going to be better now. And I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. And I hope that them as a new US knife company, making stuff in the US, being what everyone wants out of a US knife company with a lifetime warranty, all the things that people say are positives of these other US players, these guys are doing. I hope that they keep that same ability to make posts like they did today, where they're like, hey guys, we've been making our knives even better. The ones that are coming out now are superior to the ones that came out before. They can be honest about that. And they can also, when a guy like me messages them and says, hey, I see you've updated it, they can be really cool and be like, you have one of the ones we took a chance on. We are going to update it for you because we're doing it better now. Like that, that's legit good customer service. That they're making it free for me too. They're not even saying like, you cover shipping on the way to us and we'll ship it back. They're giving me a label to send it into them. And it's just like they've crossed all their T's, they've dotted all their I's. They've been doing a really good job so far. And on top of that, I like the knife design. I like the way it carries so far. I like the way it cuts. Like I'm enjoying a lot about that knife. So the fact that they're also acting the way that they're acting, I just like. And their price point isn't $450 for a US made knife with good materials. That's great. So plus their pens are dope. That's another thing too, that obviously they're technically not the same company, but it's all the same people. They're both Tactile. They're the same company. All right. So I think that's it for Tactile Knife Co. Let's talk real quick about the haptic. So I just yesterday, the day before, I posted my full review of the haptic. I recorded that right before I left on my trip. So now it's been close to a week since I recorded that full review, but I even carried it once or twice more since doing the review. And where I left off with my review of that knife in my full review was basically, I wasn't positive if I was going to keep the knife long term or ultimately let it go to keep chasing other stuff. Because it's the first knife that I spent $1,000 on. It's the first 4-figure knife for me. And over the last couple of days, I've just been stewing on it, right? Just trying to think it out, figure out whether it was worth it to me to keep a $1,000 knife sitting in my knife box that I'd carry maybe weekly, if that, maybe more realistically, probably once or twice a month, just because it's my nicest knife and I wanted to like put it in my pocket. It just didn't feel that worth it to me because I already have a couple of other knives that, like the way that it works for me at this point, I'm constantly reviewing new things, right? And so to give pocket time to something that I already own is less and less justifiable when I'm trying to make sure that I'm reviewing things in a somewhat timely manner so that the viewers aren't waiting forever for me to get to a review. If it's a loaner, I don't want people like, oh, if you send it to Jake, he's going to take 3 months to get it back to you because it takes forever to review things. I want it to be a week to 3 weeks at the most or something. Like I want to be quick with other people's things. And selfishly, I also always want to get on to the next thing because I'm curious as a person and I enjoy reviewing things. So my own knives just don't make it in pocket all that much. And so the ones that I keep around, I have to really, really, really want to keep around. And I think the thing that made the haptic the most unbearable to keep around was that it's so expensive. If the haptic cost me $500, obviously it would be a totally different conversation for a number of reasons. But a big part of it would be to resell it. I'd then only foreseeably get about $500 back out of it, right? Or trade for something else worth about $500. But that's a very different thing to have sitting in my case. I have quite a few knives sitting in my knife case right now that are worth at least $500. And I don't have the same itch to get rid of them, but something about knowing that that was a G, that was a full $1,000 just chilling there in my knife case or in my pocket on the days when I did carry it. It was like, this could be a different, really nice knife for me to check out, or this could be a couple different pretty nice knives for me to check out. And that, for me, just at the moment, outweighed the idea of keeping it there. I love that knife. I genuinely love it. It is so nice. But I've already experienced it enough to feel like I know what it's all about, and I've loved it, but I want to keep experiencing new things. Maybe one day I'll get to a point in my collection where I'll just be able to let myself be happy with what I have. And if I'm not reviewing anymore, if that day ever comes or something, not that I plan on stopping this, um, but if I get there, then I'll have a different relationship with what I keep and what I let go. It'll be like whatever makes me happy can stay, right? But at the moment, it just doesn't make all that much sense to keep. So one thing that I've been meaning to try for quite a while has been a nice Shiro, a Shirogorov, one of the Russian bear knives. I haven't ever owned a Shiro, and I've handled a few. Every single time I've been impressed by them to an extent. I don't think Shiros typically look very cool or alluring. I think they look pretty vanilla. I think they're very expensive, but the action is fantastic. And I think functionally, they typically make some actually really good knives that are compelling in the sense that for me to keep something around at the moment, I have to be willing to use it. And I can see most Shiros actually making a case for being a really good user knife, even though they're expensive, because they're built in a way that performance shines through. So also in my haptic review and just in conversations with people surrounding me reviewing the haptic, I've had a ton of people be like, you have to try a Shiro now. You have to. If you like the haptic, you're going to love a Shiro, or you should see at least how they compare, because haptics do this and Shiros do that, and they're different, but they're both they're kind of at the same level, I think is also a safe way to put it. I think both in perception and in price point and all that, they're Holt knives and certain Shiros tend to be kind of looked at as being in the same range, at least very close. So the Shiro that has gotten my attention the most over the last while, that I've been most curious about, has been the Quantum, because I'd like to see if I can middle finger flick it. It's got a little bit of a fuller thing that I think could make that work. I've heard really good things about it in general. I think it looks a little bit more interesting, a little bit more compelling than most Shiro models. And so I just put in my stories today. Well, first, let me say, I have a buddy who's actually the friend that I got the CKF Evo 2.0 from, who I went to high school with and didn't talk to for years. We weren't like close in high school, but I knew him, and he's in the knife hobby. So when I got into the knife hobby, like in terms of being online about it, having an Instagram and all that, I figured out he was too. And we've chatted every now and then since then. And I ended up buying that CKF Evo from him. After I bought that from him, I kind of felt like I owed him one in a certain way, because he gave me a bro deal on it. He could have charged me more than it went for new, and he didn't, which was really, really cool of him. So he gave me that good deal. And then when I got the haptic, he was like, dude, if you decide to let it go, let me know, because he's been chasing one, hasn't found one that was available. And they're fairly hard to come by right now. So first I messaged him and I was like, hey dude, I'm in it for an even grand. I'll give it to you for exactly that. He lives local-ish to me. So like picking up the Evo from him, I literally met him at the local In-N-Out and picked it up from him. So it would just be nice and simple for me to like an even G. No one pays for shipping. I get what I have in it back out of it. You have the knife you want. And he just started a new job, and so he's not getting paid for a couple weeks, so he's not very liquid right now. Plus, he just went to Recon 1 and bought a nice Shiro for himself, and so he didn't have the money when I messaged him. This all happened this morning, and so I was like, no worries, dude. I'm not going to list it for like a couple hours. If you're able to make something work out, because he's, I think, thinking about selling something. I was like, just let me know. But if you can't, then like I'll also help you look for one, and then when I see one available, I'll try to help you get it. But so he had to pump the brakes and was like, no, I can't really do it. And then at first he offered me a Norseman for trade, and I just reviewed the Norseman, and that didn't go so well for the old Grimsmo brothers. Not that I hate that knife, but I don't want one, especially like I specifically like the haptic much better than a Norseman. I know that because I just handled them both side by side. So I was like, no thanks. And then I posted it in my stories that I was looking for a Shirogorov Quantum. I wanted to trade the haptic for one of those. I also posted it in a Facebook group called CNC Knives, great Facebook group, by the way. And a couple hours later, I also put it in the knife selling and trading feedback, or whatever it's called, Facebook page. And there was somebody on Facebook who offered me a Quantum, but it was a user Quantum, and sent me pictures and videos of it. And it was like truly a user. It had some scuffs in a number of places. The blade had clearly been used. There were some scratches on the blade. And part of me was like, maybe that'll be nice if I go for that one and just ask the guy to throw in some cash or something to make up the difference because it's a user. But I would rather just have one that's not pre-beaten up for me at the end of the day. So I told that guy, I was like, look, I'll let you know what happens if nobody offers me one that's not in that shape. Then maybe we can talk, figure something out, because I do want to check out that knife. In the meantime, my buddy, the original one, the one who sold me the Evo, hit me up again. He's like, hey, dude, I was looking through. He's like, I've also got this Keynesen. It's the Stray. Yeah, but it's the flipper Stray, which they no longer make. At Keynesen, the way it works is they make 100 of each model of knife, and then they don't make any more. So they have knives like the Alpha and the Stray, and so there's a Stray non-flipper and there's a Stray flipper. I think for the Alpha it's the same thing. There's a flipper and a non-flipper. So there's 100 flippers, 100 non-flippers, and then they have a number of models. And I've become more and more kind of acquainted with those knives over time because I've had a few buddies start to get them. One of them is this buddy who offered me the Stray flipper. And then my buddy Ryan, who I'm partnered with on Loved Concepts, we've designed the Avant Knife, which is coming out soon. Fingers crossed that we'll be getting our prototype soon from Riyadh. He actually helps out at Keynesen on the weekends. It's not like his full-time job, but part-time he goes there and he helps with stuff, at least on Saturdays. And he's gotten close with the Keynesen guys. And he's got, I think, 2 Keynesen knives now for himself. And so I've become more and more acquainted with them. And then the guy over at Keynesen, I think his first name is Brian. I feel bad that now in the moment I'm drawing a blank on that. I'm going to have him on the podcast soon. We've talked about that. He's agreed to come on, so I need to schedule that with him. Anyway, I've gotten more and more acquainted with the brand, and I'm intrigued by the knives because they seem really nice, and they're custom knives. They're making them one at a time. They'll do 100 of each model or design, if you will. And then they don't do it anymore, which is also kind of cool that they're building in this limited aspect of it. They're doing a collaboration now also with Brian Brown, which is really cool. They'll be doing one of his models. So anyways, long story short, this wasn't a short version of a long story, was it? I ended up pulling the trigger on that trade with my buddy. So on Saturday is the plan. I'm going to drive out. He's close, like half hour, 40 minutes from me. And we're going to swap. He's going to have the haptic, and I'm going to have this flipper Stray Keynesen. And I'm pretty freaking stoked about it. I was hesitant for a little bit because it's a big deal when you're trading something worth, like, it's the most expensive knife that I've ever purchased, like I said. So to trade that for something, it's like you're playing with big boy toys now. And so I didn't want to take it too lightly and just say yes to something because it got offered to me. But I rewatched the video of the knife like 1,000 times. I talked to my buddy Ryan, who's at Keynesen a lot, and asked him some questions about the model. And he knows my preferences pretty well. He seemed confident that I'm going to like it. And it's also like, it's a custom. This one is number 46 of the flipper Strays, and they're done making that model. They won't ever make any more. So the whole haptic, they're going to keep making more of. That's their plan for right now, is to keep pumping out haptics. They're not easy to get either, but I could foreseeably have a little bit of an easier time getting another haptic if I felt like I needed one again. And I might not have another shot at a Keynesen flipper Stray. Like it would just be less likely for that to happen. And also because they're all so custom, a good number of those Keynesen Strays, I might not even like the way that they're configured or the way that they're built, or they might be so bougie that they're way more expensive than like lining up in value with this trade. So it just kind of worked out. And I'm excited to see how I feel about that knife. It'll be really my first nice, like, US made custom folder. So that's also a big deal too, that it's like, it's expensive, it's nice, it's custom, it's US built. It's like this arena that I haven't really been playing in. So it seems fitting that like my first time spending $1,000 on a knife has gotten me to here. Like, letting go of the haptic is its own thing, and it's taking me down this new route where I'm trying another new thing through that. And so I just think it's kind of cool. But I don't know. I figured I'd share how that all went. Maybe that helps you see inside my brain a little bit more in the way that it works. I try to be an open book in that way. I don't know. So those are most of the notes that I wanted to talk about myself. I'm not usually a big note taker, but I knew that if I just rambled on this, I'd actually get probably nowhere with nobody else and no subject. But I did, like I said, put up that story where I asked people kind of an ask me anything if they had any questions for me to answer while I was on here. Some of these are knife related, some are definitely not, but I figured it would be fun. We'll see. Maybe people will hate this and everybody will stop listening or watching at this point. If that's you and you hate this, let me know so I know not to do it again. Or if you liked it, then let me know that as well. But the first response I got was from my buddy Ricky, Captain Ricky, on Instagram. And Ricky and I are in a group chat together with a few other close buddies. And one of whom I actually just met when I went up to Utah. I was luckily able to carve out a little bit of time. Sorry, I'll get to Ricky's question in a second. I was able to meet up with Brandon, Everyday Minimalist, who will also be on my podcast soon. That's coming. And with Tyler, EDC Gear Reviews, who was my last guest on the podcast before this episode that you're listening to right now. So it was fun. Brandon has kind of a relationship with the guys over at Blade Ops, which is in Utah. I'd never been to that shop. It's been a long time since I've even been in Utah, even though I've got a sister who lives there. But we set up a time to meet at Blade Ops, and I invited Tyler as well because I just had him on the podcast. He's a cool dude. He's become a friend. So we go over to Blade Ops, and I got to meet up with Brandon, which was a lot of fun to meet up with two knife buddies who I've really only met virtually. But Brandon I've been talking to for a long time, basically since he started his YouTube channel is when we kind of connected, not long after I started mine. And he's bigger than me now on every platform, mostly because TikTok, he freaking crushes it. We'll talk about that on the podcast. But and then Tyler, who I spent a couple hours talking with on the podcast, and we've talked a bunch since. And so it was a lot of fun to meet these guys in person. And then Brandon also, I'm not totally sure how he did it, whether I should completely be thanking him or be thanking Blade Ops or both of them. But Blade Ops has an exclusive PM2 that they're basically out of at this point. And it's an Emerson wave opening PM2 that's a saber grind instead of a full flat, totally different PM2 that I feel like not that many people have been aware of for some reason. It just wasn't all that popular. I'm not huge into Emerson waves. I knew about it. I didn't end up getting one, but they gave me one, which was really cool. And I've actually been enjoying it more than I thought I would. So you'll be seeing a first impressions on that soon on the channel. But anyway, so I got to meet up with these buddies, and Ricky is in that same group chat that I'm in with Brandon. I think I actually invited Brandon to that originally, but we talk a lot in there. And Ricky has become one of my really good buddies. That was a long way to say that, wasn't it? Sorry, everybody. All right. So Ricky's question was, what is my strongest Los Angeles story? What's my strongest LA story? Ricky has spent some time in LA, and I'm kind of the token Southern California dude in that group chat, which is hilarious. I'm also, it's funny, Kevin left EDC one time made a statement that I'm kind of an enigma because I have, I guess, somewhat of a hipster vibe. I'm not going to fight it. If people see that, it is what it is. But I'm like from the LA area with this kind of hipsterish vibe. But I'm also like super into knives and firearms. And I'm really into like the outdoors, not in like a hike by the Hollywood sign kind of way either, like real outdoors. Like I don't really fit the mold, but in some ways I seem to. So it's this funny thing. But anyways, I was trying to think about it. what my strongest LA story is. And I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of ways I could maybe answer that question of what my strongest LA story is. But it's like, I guess trying to think about it, my mind goes to like maybe celebrity sightings or things like that. I feel like people associate that with LA. Maybe people also associate it with like homelessness. That's a thing too. There's a lot of that. I've had plenty of encounters with homeless people, but we're going to go the celebrity route. So it's not that like if you're walking around in Los Angeles that you're just going to see celebrities everywhere. I think some people might think that's the way it is. But if you live here long enough, you might chance into some of them every now and then. Like just a couple weeks ago on the hike that I was on with my wife and her sister and her sister's husband and their kids and my kid, we while hiking went right by Sarah Silverman, which she's a pretty decent celebrity. I don't typically care all that much. I'm genuinely not the kind of guy who like gets worked up over any celebrities. There are very few celebrities who I'd be like, that's really cool that I saw that person. I just kind of think of people as people. In fact, a lot of celebrities I kind of don't like. So I might be like, have a negative reaction if I saw one of them. Anyway, so this happened 4th of July, not this past year, had to be the year before. So like 4th of July, 2019, maybe. It might even could have been 2018. But at the time, my wife was doing some work for a local business that does like motherhood stuff, right? Nothing that anybody who listens to this, I'm sure, would have heard of. But her boss was a really cool lady who we kind of became friends with. And she had a couple of kids, and her youngest were just a little older than my daughter. And so we would hang out with them now and then, and we'd been to their house a few times, and they invited us over for 4th of July. And so we went over there, and they have a nice pool in the backyard, and I think they were grilling or whatever, but it was like their neighborhood basically is who was attending. Like they're pretty close with this whole kind of like circle of neighbors right around them, live in this beautiful house in Pasadena. And so we're there, and I'm in the pool, and then a guy gets in the pool, and I thought he looked familiar at first, but it took me a second to realize how or why. And just a few days before, we'd been at a movie theater, and I think the guy's name is Charlie Day. The guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia was in the seat next to me with his wife and kid, and we were watching, I think it was The Incredibles 2. That'll probably put a timestamp on when that was. I don't know when it was, but we're in the theater, we're watching this movie, and next to me is like Charlie Day, right? And I've watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia quite a bit. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. It's him, but I didn't like say anything to the guy. I didn't want to make it awkward. We're at a pretty normal theater, and I imagine he probably doesn't want it to turn into like something where people are hounding him for autographs or whatever. So I didn't really say a thing about it other than to my wife, like, hey, look, it's Charlie Day. So this guy gets in the pool, and at first I thought it was Charlie Day, which is hilarious because it wasn't. I forget this actor's name, but he was in the show New Girl. He's one of the main guys. And then he's in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. He's the real Spider-Man, the one who's kind of washed up, which is hilarious. I think his first name is Jake, now that I think of it. Anyways, so this guy gets in the pool, and at first I was about to be like, oh, I was in the theater next to you the other day. And then after a minute, I realized that was a totally different actor. It shows you how much I really care, I guess. But so luckily I didn't say that, because that would have been weird. But anyways, I was just talking to him like a normal person, and we had kids about the same age, and super nice guy, and literally just like in the pool with me and my kid, and like swimming, having a good time, 4th of July party. And so I like kind of hit it off with this guy like I would with any other dad, just like hanging out at a barbecue, not like we're going to become friends after this kind of thing, but like he was a nice dude. And so we were just chatting quite a bit, and we end up leaving that night, and literally like, I forget how, I think I was talking to my wife about how I was like being friendly with this guy. And she's like, look at you hanging out with this like guy who's in all these movies. Right. And then she texted her friend about it. The one who invited us was like, isn't it funny that Jake like became friends with your celebrity neighbor or whatever? Like he just lives on the block with these people. That's why he was invited. And literally this group of like neighbor friends didn't know that he was an actor or that he was even successful. They thought that the wife was the successful one and that he was just like this lazy bum of a husband who like they would just see him like randomly doing yard work, and sometimes it would seem like he was home way too much, probably like between A-list acting gigs, like when he's not recording Spider-Man that won awards. Like it was hilarious that these people found out because we talked to him and we're friends with him, and then we're like, that's cool that you're neighbors with such and such. And even like this lady who invited us, her husband is like in the industry. He's in Hollywood. He's like a writer or something. So the fact that he also did, it was very funny that like I became friends with the like actor at this party, and all these people who were there like have purposely not been friends with him. So that's probably part of why he thought I was so nice. They're all like, oh, this freeloader who just like, he doesn't do anything. His wife does all the work. And meanwhile, he's like a very successful actor. Anyways, it's not like I've ever talked to the guy since or that we're actually friends or anything. I'm not trying to toot my own horn with the story, but I think that it's a good illustration of how maybe jaded some LA people can be to the kind of thing like that. I don't know. Maybe that's interesting. Maybe it's not. Maybe I just lost a lot of people, but there's my strongest LA story for Ricky. All right. So the next question was, what are my current top 5 knives? And that was from franz.edc, franz.edc. I just did my updated top 10. I posted that today as of when I'm recording this. And my top 5, I hope I'm not wrong about this because I just did that video. It was Arius, Haptic, which now is only in my possession for like another 24 hours, basically, 36 hours. Anyways, it was Arius, Haptic. Number 3, I believe, was the CKF Evo 2.0. That sounds right. Number 4, yeah, I've got this right. Number 4 was the Konig Mini Goblin. And number 5 was the Brian Brown Jaeger M. Number 6, which I guess would now, if you're pulling the Haptic out, would be bumped up to 5, and the Evo would be 2. What was number 6? Number 6, I don't think it was the 8020. No, I feel bad. I don't remember. But that's my current top 5 at the moment. So that's fair. That's a good answer for that. All right, next question was, if I could only save 5 knife companies, like the rest of them are going away in this theory, and there's only 5 knife companies left, which 5 would I save? And I guess why? And that was from Tungsten Carbide. It's a good question. So answering the first place is Spyderco. I'm a Spyderco fanboy. I got this question not long ago, like what's my favorite knife company, or if I could only own knives from one knife company for the rest of my life, and that's the only knife company I can have knives from, but I like get all of them that I want, Spyderco. Because at the end of the day, even though I'm deep in the hobby and I appreciate so much about knives, that is like deep compared to most people who just look at knives as the tools that they are. Like I've started to move towards some artistic qualities, even though function is still always going to be important to me. At the end of the day, Spyderco is just the one where I feel like I get all of the function that I need, and they're good at building knives that I see as tools, and they use holes instead of studs, which I prefer. They don't really play with flippers all that much. Like, I love holes for deployment. I love the compression lock. They make really nice, high quality knives out of Taichung and out of Golden, Colorado. And so, yeah, Spyderco would be number 1. Number 2, I guess, frankly, would probably be like Konig. The Arius has been my favorite knife for a long time. I don't want that to go away. I love my Mini Goblin now that I've got that as well. They're a cool US company that's making incredible knives, and they're nice people over there. So yeah, I feel like that would be on there. Knife companies that I would say, yeah, this is difficult because I feel like by picking some, I'm saying that I would kill others. Maybe that's not the way I should look at it. I'm not wishing death upon any knife companies in particular, but yeah, Spyderco, Konig. I guess I'd probably want to keep around like TRM. I always talk about the way that those people are over there And they're just a great example of a good knife company that I like and respect, and I like their knives, so that helps. I'm not going to pick a knife company whose knives I don't like just because they're cool people. Cool people could do other things too if they couldn't make knives. But if you're a cool person who also makes knives, then I especially like that. Okay, so that's Spyderco, Konig, TRM. Tough, tough, tough. I don't know. I guess Riat. Riat's going to be making my knife, and many of my favorite knives are Riat produced. So maybe that's controversial for people who hate Chinese manufactured knives. Riat makes amazing knives. They're really, really good for competitive pricing, and I'm leaning on them to make the knife that I'm coming out with. So that's number 4. Number 5. Thinking about like what's in my collection, what would I least want to like not have exist anymore? Oh, that is tough. I don't know. I guess let's go with this because this is a knife company that I'm excited about. Demko. And that may seem kind of crazy because right now there's not a lot of like models happening from Demko. Really, all they're making at the moment, I think they're at their shop is the 8020. I don't think they're making 8015s actively or 8010s. And even if they were, that's only 3 models, right? But they have the 8020.5, which is a production knife being made in Taiwan, which is a little too budgetish for me. I plan on trying one, but I would like to see where they're going to go, especially now that Cold Steel has been sold and that the production 8020.5 seems to be being made by Cold Steel's facilities, the best that I can figure out on my own based on the information about it, but is not being branded as a Cold Steel. It's being branded as a Demko knife. So I'd like to see if Demko starts doing more production and more variations of knives like the 8020. And I mean, he can use the Scorpion lock. He can use the Triad lock. That's his. Like, I think he can use that. I know Cold Steel uses it, but it's his invention. So I don't know. I think it would be really cool to see Demko continue to flourish. And by default, with the nature of this question, if he was one of only 5 knife companies, he'd probably flourish. There would be much less competition. So yeah, I think those would be my 5 picks. But I don't know. If I thought about it longer, that answer might definitely change. Those very off the cuff. Next question. This is a good one. What will my Roosevelt options be? This is from CD Silv 93. CDSILV 93. I'm not 100% certain yet what options I'm going to go with, but I think I know. It could change, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But the way I feel with it at the moment, based on these current book spots, the one that I got one of, the options aren't as unlimited as they were in previous book spot openings. And he seems to be cranking through these pretty quick, at least in what I've seen the last few days. So he's doing that new handle milling pattern that he's calling like the golf putter milling pattern. I want to do that. That looks cool to me. I think I'm going to like the way it feels in hand because it'll add a little bit of grip to those otherwise pretty smooth scales without being rough, based on what I can see of it, right? So I plan on doing that. And I plan, frankly, for the Roosevelt to be a user knife for me. The reason why I'm getting one is because I want to put it in my pocket. I want to carry it places. I want to pull it out and I want to cut things with it. So I don't want to make it like super dressy or super fancy. I'm also just not into really dressy, fancy materials. So I'm thinking I'll do that golf putter milling pattern, which is, I think, a free option too. That's really cool of him. I don't want to do like acid stone washing. That's just not super my speed personally, even though that is a good user finish. So I think what I'll do is he does an anodizing like brown color. It's like a flat dark earth anodizing that I've seen him do on at least one other build so far and looks awesome. So I want to do that. And then I'm just going to do titanium hardware. I'm not going to do Zerk or Timascus on the backspacer or the clip or anything like that. I'm just going to do titanium. And I want to see if he can make it black, because I think all black hardware with the like flat dark earth colored scales would look awesome. If he can't do like true black, because I don't know if he's doing coated hardware on this run, Then I'll have him just do like darkened tie. So it's at least like a dark, deep gray, I think. And then for blade finish, I hope that he's doing the vapor honed on these. If he is, I plan to do that because I like that finish from him. If not, I'll probably just do like the basic stone washed blade. So it'll be pretty simple. In fact, I'm not sure if it'll even cost more than the base price. If so, it'll be by like $50 or something. I don't want to add fancy materials just because they don't make any sense for me. I've already paid the $500 for the knife itself, and so it wouldn't be that crazy for me to add a couple $100 when my spot comes up for me to add some stuff to it. Like, it's not that I'm just being cheap about it. It's just that genuinely for me, the way I see that knife, I don't want those things on it. So it'll probably be that brown color with the golf putter mill pattern and black hardware if possible. Hopefully a vapor honed blade, but maybe just stone washed. So that's the plan at the moment. That's what I'm going with. All right, next question was, what are my expectations for the Konig Mini Arius? And this was actually from my buddy Garrett, who works at Konig, which is awesome. So this is an interesting question because the Arius has been my favorite knife for a long time. In this top 10 video that I just did, it was number one again. In the last one, it was number one. It had been number one in my collection for a while before I did that video. It was a grail for me, and then I ultimately got one and loved it, and then I let it go, and then I regretted it, and then I got another one, and the Arius is just like the knife for me, right? I love the Arius so much. So a mini Arius is two things. Incredibly exciting because it's my favorite knife in a different size, but it's also nerve-wracking is the wrong word. It's not like I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid that it won't be as good as the full-size Arius. I don't know. Part of me, for a long time, I wished the Arius was a little smaller. At the moment, I don't. I like the size of the Arius, but that's a primary knife for me. That's a front right pocket knife all day long. That the current Arius will not be going in my back pocket as a secondary or my coin pocket or anything like that, right? The mini Arius, if it's a secondary in size for me, the way that I carry and prefer secondary knives, and if it's as good as its bigger brother, it will be an ultimate knife for me. Like, knowing Konig, it is going to be fantastic. If I had to guess, I would put money on it being an incredibly good knife in terms of its fit and finish, its tolerances, the grind, like the materials, the way everything goes together. It would be amazing. It should be amazing. But because I have such high expectations, there is that little bit of like, it's on thin ice, like if it slips up and isn't as good as the big one, then it's like, why'd you make it smaller? Like I don't know. That's got to be kind of scary coming out with a new model when, or like an iteration on a current model when that current model is so beloved. I imagine it's going to be good though. So I am more excited than I am nervous, but there's a little bit of nervousness because I like the regular Arius so much. It's getting late. I'm fumbling over my words, aren't I? So I guess those are my expectations, if that makes any sense. Next question was, what is my favorite gift knife? And this was from given PNW, given underscore PNW. That's a tough question. I've been given some really, really cool knives in my life. I've reviewed a couple of knives that I've been given. The first one, the one that like kind of immediately pops into my head, is the Benchmade Sentinel. It's an Elishewitz design, and my dad gave me that knife, and it was a knife that he carried and used for a while before giving it to me, and it was just a knife that I was always like jealous of. I always wanted to check it out and hold it and play with it when it was what he was carrying or when I saw it on his nightstand or whatever it was. And so ultimately when he gave me that knife, that felt like a really big deal because I had always like wanted it. It was a knife that I'd seen so much and was really nice, especially at the time. Um, so yeah, that's definitely up there. But then there's a couple of knives that my wife has given me now, which are also meaningful because my wife gave them to me. Uh, It's funny, like most of the knives that are gifts from my wife are actually zero tolerance knives. And that's just kind of happened. But the last two were the ZT 0620. And that was kind of as I was getting into the hobby of knives. I think I got that knife, and it was like right thereafter that I actually made my Instagram, that at the time was called Knives, Guns, Cars, but has evolved into now Bearded Gear. And then I don't remember if it was her Father's Day or my birthday or Christmas or what, but she got me a ZT 308 as well. That probably makes it seem less meaningful than the other one. The 620 was for my birthday. I know that. But yeah, so it's between the Benchmade Sentinel, or when I was dating my wife, she got me the ZT 0350. And I remember my dad went to the gun show with my brother, the local one in the county where we grew up. And we would go to that gun show a lot. And I couldn't go to this one, I think, because I was hanging out with my wife, girlfriend at the time. And they came back and both had a brand new zero tolerance 0350. And ZT was new at this time. I'd had quite a few Kershaws in my life, but ZT was like their new enhanced brand. And I was already a fan of Kershaw. And so it was like really cool that they were making these knives, and the branding was really like tactical, zero tolerance. Like it was a thing. And I was so jealous that they had each gotten one. And I didn't really have the money to just buy myself one, mostly because I was dating my now wife and spending all my money on gas and food and dates and like, um, but I wouldn't let her pay for anything. That was a big deal for me. And we ate out a ton, and I didn't work that amazing of a job. And so like I just didn't have disposable income to be like buying myself things. And then when she saw how much I wanted one, and I like talked about how cool it was, she ordered one for me. And I think she even like had to go on eBay. It was like kind of difficult to find, and she like found one online and ordered it for me, and then like surprised me with it just as a gift, just because it wasn't for an anniversary or a birthday or anything like that. It was like while we were dating, she just knew I wanted one, and she would do stuff like that because I wouldn't let her pay for anything. She'd be like, all right, I'm just going to buy you something cool then. So she did. She bought me the ZTO 350. So yeah, I think, I don't know, it's hard. It's like, it's a totally different emotion getting something from your dad than getting something from your girlfriend, now wife. It's hard to say which one's more meaningful. So I'm just going to cop out and say they're both meaningful. Um, yeah. All right. So next question. What mod or aftermarket edition has changed a knife the most for me? And this was from Eric for EDC. He's actually the one that I bought my current Arius from. A really cool dude. We were just chatting about that the other night, how I still have that knife and love it. And he was really cool for selling that to me. So that's an interesting question. I feel like the knives that I mod the most are Spyderco's, partially just because there is so many options for what you can do to a Spyderco. Like every Para 3 or PM2 that I've ever had, basically pretty much every one of them has gotten an aftermarket clip, whether it's a Lynch clip or an MXG clip. So if you consider that a mod, which most people probably wouldn't consider that like a mod, I don't know. Aftermarket edition, though, was part of the question. So I changed clips on Spyderco's a ton. I changed scales on Spyderco's a ton. So it's probably got to be a Spyderco that's like the most meaningful or has changed the knife the most for me. But there's been a few others. Like, you know what it is? It's a knife that I just recently got. The ZT 0640 Emerson design. That knife I had heard a lot of good things about, and I got one from River's Edge Cutlery because it was like I finally just needed to check one of these out. And when I decided to get one, I already knew I was going to be getting a bunch of stuff to go on it because I didn't like the way the factory scales looked. The clip I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know how badly I needed to change it until I got the knife. And I ended up doing a thumb disc for it as well. My full review will happen on that soon. I've already done the install video that's live, but that knife with the factory clip, I was unwilling to carry. That clip was so atrociously bad And I think the factory scales were frankly pretty freaking ugly. I do not like the like lime green colored carbon fiber that they put on it. I just think it looked bad. The thumb disc that I put on it helps. I put an oversized zirconium thumb disc from Great Precision on it. But yeah, as soon as I ordered that knife, I reached out to Sharp Dress Knives and I asked him if he had anything in stock. And he said he had just gotten some material, so I had to wait a little bit, but it was really cool. He made me a set and made me an extra set to give away, which will be going live soon. I'll be doing a YouTube giveaway, including those. But yeah, those fat carbon scales make the knife look billion times better, and that clip saved the knife, because if I hadn't put that Lynch deep carry aftermarket clip on it, I wouldn't be willing to carry the knife. When it had the factory clip on it, I tried sliding it in and out of pocket, and it was so bad. Just one of the worst pocket clips, most useless. It's the poorest excuse for a pocket clip I've pretty much ever seen, especially on a production knife. I don't know what ZT was thinking with that pocket clip. It is unacceptably bad, in my opinion. And a pocket clip is such an important thing, but also such a small thing on a knife. Like, I get that not every pocket clip is going to be perfect, but there should be an expectation of functionality. And it's like unfunctional, that pocket clip. Maybe it was just mine. I doubt it. It was that pocket clip was bad. So yeah, I think that's the knife that like changed the most in terms of me hating it. There were things about the knife objectively that I liked, but I was unwilling to carry it and use it because that pocket clip was so bad and the scales didn't help. I didn't like the way they looked. And now the way that knife sits, it's exciting to me, and it pockets well and it carries well, and that's all good. So I guess that answers that. All right. Next question. If I could only keep 3 knives, what would they be and why? And that's from Jonathan at Redeemed Creations Co., who I've had on the podcast recently as well. That's a tough question, because it's interesting, like creating my top 10. Real interesting now in the moment, I'm realizing, because I just created my top 10. That video went live today, and today I traded the knife that was number 2 in that lineup. So it's not like I can just pick my top 3 current knives in terms of like, what are my favorites? And those would be the only ones I'd keep, because I just let go of number 2, right? Clearly, that's not the way I operate. To me, that's more of a question of like, what 3 knives do I either find the most utility in, or would I be least willing to get rid of? And that opens up a totally different can of worms, because like I said, quite a few of my knives have been gifts. And so to me, it's like a rule. I won't get rid of a knife that was a gift from a loved one. So I guess by default, I would keep the Benchmade my dad gave me. I would keep the ZT my wife gave me. I probably wouldn't keep the other 2 ZTs that my wife gave me. Sorry. But like, if I'm keeping just 3 knives ever for the rest of my life, I guess honestly the other knife would probably just have to be like my River's Edge Cutlery exclusive Scorpion PM2 with 10V blade steel, because I could just use that knife forever and I wouldn't have to sharpen it all that often. If I still have my KME, I'd be able to sharpen it when the time comes. And the PM2 is just kind of an ultimate user for me. It's just really, really good at the things I expect from knives. And that's also a PM2 that like I don't have a problem taking outdoors and having as my like hiking companion knife. Yeah, I guess that would be it. I'd keep those 2 sentimental knives and my ultimate PM2. The 10V one is my favorite one in terms of its functionality that's ever come out. I carry the Rec Avocado PM2 a lot as well, because I love the OD and FDE. But functionality wise, I'd take 10V over 204P. So yeah, I guess that's the answer. All right, that's a good question. Next one is, what's my favorite dinosaur and why? And this was from Sensory Overload. Favorite dinosaur and why? I probably should have thought about some of these before doing this, and I clearly did not. Favorite dinosaur. I feel like I haven't been asked that in so many years that I don't know a good answer anymore. I want to say something that makes me sound really cool, or like I know a lot about dinosaurs. I know like surface level dinosaur info for sure. like more than my 6-year-old, so I can answer some of her questions. Favorite dinosaur. You know what I would pick? Because this is genuinely a really cool dinosaur in theory. I don't know what they're called, but they were like a giant alligator type of thing that was more swimming focused than land focused. Like currently alligators are a little more leggy. This was a little more finny. I'm sounding really smart here. I want to say in Jurassic World, the new ones with Chris Pratt, and that first one with him when they're like on the island or whatever, it's what's in the tank. And it like they put the thing like suspended up over the water and it like jumps out to grab it. That's a cool dinosaur. Yeah, I feel like most people would be pretentious and be like T-Rex or Velociraptor, Pterodactyl, like Brontosaurus, like all the names, you know. That one's so obscure I don't even know the name of it. That's how cool I am. I don't know. That's a cool dinosaur. Let's go with that. Whatever it's called. Someone, I'm sure, in the comments can let us know if anyone has gotten this deep into this terrible, terrible podcast. All right. So that's my favorite dinosaur. The finny, not leggy alligator giant thing. I think one of those could also take a megalodon, which is important because megalodons were like dinosaur sharks, but those seemed tougher than the megalodon. All right. Most annoying oversight in a knife. This is from Jason of the Millie PM2 Pair 3 Club. He's also been on the podcast. I feel like a lot of people answered my story poll that have been on the podcast. It's probably because a lot of them are my friends. Most annoying oversight in a knife. So like something that I guess a designer or a maker wouldn't have realized when they made the knife, I guess is the way that I understand that question. I don't know. There are things that I would say are oversights because they don't align with my preferences, like putting a glass breaker on a knife. I'd say is an oversight because it would be much better if you just didn't. But for some reason they do a lot of time. But I don't think that's a fair way of understanding that question. I think that's me kind of molding my preferences to it. Yeah, I mean, I don't like glass breakers. I don't like lanyard holes. But is that an oversight? That feels more like a design choice. It's not a choice I agree with. What's an oversight? I don't know. There are nitpicky things like just the other night I unboxed. Was that last night? I think that was last night. I unboxed a Medford from Kevin, and I like this Medford. Objectively, I'm actually liking it. Kevin will be very glad to hear me say that. He's going to wish I said love, but I don't love it. Not yet. Maybe that'll happen. Doubt it. But I hated the Medford that Kyle loaned me, the 187 DP. But something that I noticed right off the bat with this Medford, it's the slim MIDI, is when the knife is closed, a little bit of the face where it locks up with the lock bar, the lock face, if you will, is sticking proud of the scales in a way that just to me doesn't look intentional. And then also the detent track and the like detent hole that holds the knife closed when it's in the closed position are just like out and exposed while the knife is open. And it's because they put the pivot screw so close to the end of the scale. I get that that's how it happened, but to me, it just like from a design perspective, I don't know, like it seems it's an odd choice to me. I guess you could say that maybe it was deliberate that they did that, and there's some reason why they thought that was cool at Medford to have components that are typically internal, and I would argue maybe are internal for a reason. I don't know. I guess it's probably not that harmful to have your lock face sticking out or your detent track exposed while the knife is open, but I also don't see a reason why it would be any kind of advantage to have them exposed when on just about every other knife they're not. And so to me, it just looks funky and weird, and I don't really like it aesthetically. It feels like there should be a little bit more scale just added on past where it currently ends to cover those things. And then they're covered. And you don't have to worry about them. I don't know. That's, I would say, kind of an oversight. But yeah, I mean, things like glass breakers and lanyard tubes and stuff like that, I'm always going to be like, that's an oversight because 99% of the market doesn't like to use them. So why are you putting them on? But yeah, again, that's probably me taking that in the wrong direction. So anyways, decent question, Jason. I'll give you that. It got me thinking. I'll probably after this come up with a way better answer than that Medford thing. But anyway, all right, next question was, I forget, I wrote down like a Cliff Notes version of it, but it was about eBay prices, and it was by Phantom Power Projects, was the person who asked the question. So this is an interesting timing too, that question came in right after Jason's, because I think Jason has done a video. It's probably on YouTube. I hope it is. He posts from the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club YouTube every now and then. I wish he would do it more. But he did a video on eBay prices, if I'm remembering correctly. I know he's at least talked about it. And he's pointed out how ridiculous it can be, like something that happens around every drop. Like at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about the swish buoy drop, right? Every time that happens, seemingly, somebody will screenshot some eBay listing. Like there's one, at least yesterday or whatever, for the swish buoy. Someone listed one on eBay for $4,000. And there's a bunch of people who are just, oh my gosh, can you believe somebody thinks they can get $4,000 for it? Can you believe if somebody falls for that? Oh my, like, that's another moment where I just want to say, shut up. A couple of things about eBay, from the way I understand it, just as somebody who frankly doesn't spend much time on eBay, doesn't really care for eBay, especially in the world of knife sales. I typically try to encourage people, if they're looking to buy, sell, or trade, to stay away from eBay. I think it is a horrible platform for it. A couple things to understand about it are, A, if somebody lists a knife for $1,000 on eBay, and I have some eBay account that I can make bids from that's tied to an email, whether it's a burner email or whatever it may be. I have some eBay account. If the current bids are at $1,000, right? And then I just want to blow it out of the water and make sure no one gets it and teach this seller a lesson because they're being a scalper, I can bid for $5,000 and win that and then never pay the person the money. And it'll just show, from the way I understand it, as a sold listing, therefore adding evidence that this knife sold for $5,000 when really it didn't. And then there's also, like, people can sometimes just post things like a swish buoy for $4,000 for some weird motivation, knowing entirely well that it's not going to sell. And maybe it'll get turned into memes. Maybe it'll just become, maybe they're hoping to, from another account, list one for $500 or $700 or $800, and people will be like, oh, well, now I'll buy the one that's cheaper because there's a listing that's $4,000. That means I'm getting it for a steal. Like, there's these weird motivations that come into play, and the rules are different than other selling platforms where people buy and sell and trade knives. Like if you're on a Facebook group for that, or in Reddit for that, or on Instagram following hashtags for that, like, there's different etiquette in each of these places. And I think on eBay, it is the worst and it is the stupidest. And I don't know. I know that it's funny because as much as I think it's like kind of annoying, I know that Jason, part of why he's made that video is because he gets bothered by it. Because every time that there's some new exclusive that comes out, there's a bunch of people in the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club who will just start screenshotting and sharing these ridiculous eBay listings as if they're factual. Can you believe some, like, stop it. It's not real life. It's fairy tale land. It's made up. It's not, like, if it's happening, it's not people in the knife community who understand what's going on, who are trying that. Or if there's ever anybody falling for it, it's definitely not somebody who has a pulse on the knife community and what things are actually going for. Like, it's fairy tale made up BS. And so I agree with Jason's sentiments that it's not worth being shared as if it's any kind of factual information about what's going on. It's nonsense what's going on eBay. So there's that, I guess. All right. Next question. Favorite blade shape. This was from Cowboy underscore 111220003. Interesting handle. All right. It's a lot of numbers. It's also like that can't really be a date or so, I don't know. Good for you, cowboy. My favorite blade shape. I guess my question for your question would be for what? Because I think different blade shapes certainly have different strengths. But if I were to try to just pick one for myself, my preferences, yeah, I don't know. Those questions are hard for me because my brain immediately goes to like, if I pick one, it's not going to be good for everything. So I want to have multiple. I would say to paint a broad stroke, my favorite blade shape is probably just Wharncliffe. I really like the functionality that I get out of Wharncliffe blades for the way that I typically use my knives, especially in like EDC tasks. Opening boxes, cutting up packaging, processing cardboard, cutting through stuff in the kitchen. Like Wharncliffes tend to work pretty well for me. I like that oftentimes you get a very acute tip. You can get in and do kind of fine, detailed, like little precise work with. And then also the way the edge is placed in relation to your hand, I typically find is good on a Wharncliffe. The fact that if I'm cutting into like tape or something, I don't have to revolve my hand super far to get the tip to where I can start to puncture into things. It's just a little tilt, tiny bit, and then the tip is, because it's placed at the bottom level with the edge, it's right there. I like that. But like for outdoors use, Wharncliffes aren't my choice. But I'm outdoors less than I'm indoors because it's 2021 and I live in the greater LA area. So like, yeah, Wharncliffe is my choice, but it's not my choice for everything. But yeah, I'll say it's my favorite. That's fair. It's my favorite. Okay. All right, last question, and then we'll put a bow on this thing. This has gone longer than I anticipated it going for it being just me. The last question was Ace Biblio or Grand. So which giant mouse do I prefer, the Ace Biblio or the Ace Grand? This question was from Ooh Weaver, Ooweaver. That's actually really easy. The Grand, hands down. The Grand is not only the knife I'd pick over the Ace Biblio, but it's just my favorite giant mouse knife that I have ever encountered. Including I have owned like a GM2, which is part of their like their like limited run knives that are even nicer. The Grand is just my favorite. I really like it. I like the size. I like the action. I like the ergos. I like the way it carries. I love the materials. It's a home run of a knife, in my opinion. I think it's the best knife the Giant Mouse has ever made. And then in addition to that, I think the Biblio would probably be third if I were to rank their folders, because the Riv I actually like better than the Biblio, even though it's a little bit smaller. The forward choil is a little bit bigger, and so the Biblio is already kind of small enough that to me it's more secondary size, but it's really thick for a secondary. So if it's in my back pocket, it's kind of bulky, and the Riv is just tiny. It fits so well as a secondary, and I find I get just as much utility about as I do out of the Biblio with it in a smaller package that's lighter, slimmer, and I mean, the Biblio is a good knife, though. I like the Biblio. I find that it fills my hand well because it is kind of a chunky little sucker, but it's like thick handles with kind of a thinnish blade stock that's full flat grounds. It slices well while filling the hand well, and it's got some things going for it for sure. But yeah, if I were to rank the Giant Mouse knives that I own or have owned, I would say it's probably Grand, and then because I have owned a GM2, I'd probably put that second. I did like that knife. If it had a flipper delete, I would have loved it, but the flipper was the detent was too soft for that flipper, so that's why I got rid of it. But it was super nice, the milled carbon fiber, like really cool Bowie blade shape. Anyways, it'd be Grand, GM2, Riv, probably the GM F1 would be after that, the little fixed blade. I actually just recently sold that to a viewer who really wanted it, but then it would be Biblio. Then it would be Sonoma. I'd probably like the Sonoma more, if I'm being totally honest, if I hadn't had the issues with it that I did in the beginning. Even now that it's fixed, like my experience with it isn't quite as positive as I'd like it to be, but it's also like a little slimmer than I like. The clip I'm not huge on. That full review will be up soon, so I won't spoil it all. And then I think last place would probably be what's it called? The Iona. I had that for like 20 minutes before returning it. It's one of the only knives I've ever returned. It wasn't like there was even necessarily a problem with it. I just didn't like it. It wasn't a knife that I liked when I got it out of the box, and I returned it. So I guess that's my giant mouse ranking at the moment. But yeah, the Grand is number one. It's my favorite giant mouse knife. Hands down, I think it's the best knife they've ever done, that I've experienced at least. So there's that. All right, that was all the questions that I wrote down. I closed the questions once all those were in because I didn't want people to keep asking while I was recording this and then have it be like they didn't get a chance to be on the show. So yeah, hopefully this was in some way enjoyable to have it be just me. You guys probably hear too much of me if you watch me on YouTube a lot. This is basically just like a super long form video of mine without me holding up knives and only rambling. So some of the choice viewers who wish I would do tabletop, I definitely don't like this. That's one of those funny things that I always get a kick out of. It's like, if you don't like the way that I'm making videos, why is your reaction to tell me that I need to change it, to do it the way you want it, instead of just not watching? Like, am I so attractive that you can't stand to, or is it my voice? Is my voice so incredible? I actually really dislike listening to my own voice. I'm sure most people do. What is it about me that instead of just declining to watch anymore, people feel the need to like, here's what you got to do different, bud, in order for me to stick around? Like, why should I care? I'm appreciative of the subscribers that I have, of course. I'm appreciative of the people who comment, the people who support me in any way. It means a lot, genuinely. But if any one subscriber thinks that their opinion is so important, like that I should change things for them, no, it's just it's just not. I'm sorry. Especially if I don't know you. If you're one of my best friends and you're like, hey, I think you could do this better by doing it this way or changing this, glad to hear it. If you're someone I've never really heard from and I don't know your name, like, nope, don't tell me what to do. I'm resistant to that. That's for sure. Anyway, sorry. I tend to go down into those weeds every now and then. I just find it endlessly entertaining, maybe interesting that people think the way they do in today's world. Yeah, that's a thing. All right, so I guess that's kind of it. This has been episode number 18. Hopefully it was, again, in some way entertaining. It was different for me to do it this way, to just have kind of a list of notes of things to talk about and then allow my mind to wander a little bit on each subject and try to bring it back. So yeah, let me know if you found this better, different, worse than a typical podcast. I don't imagine I'll do this very often anyways. Even if people love it, selfishly, I'm not going to do this all that often because I prefer having a guest. Part of why I love the podcast so much, it's become probably my favorite part of having the channel, doing these weekly podcast episodes, is because I get to have tremendously interesting, at the very least, conversations with other people who are passionate about knives and gear. And I get to pick the brains of people who I look up to and people who I can learn from. And I get to share my experiences with those people and relate to them and become friends with them. And like, that's really cool. Like, literally, while I was in Utah this past week to meet up with a buddy who I just had on the podcast, somebody who I'm going to be having on it, who I've just known through the internet, was really cool. While I was there, Ben Peterson, before I had left, we had talked about going hiking. He ended up getting all of his titanium rulers for his Kickstarter in like the day before I got there. So he was just in packaging mode. He couldn't break away for a hike. But he invited me to come by and say hi. I ended up getting too busy hanging out with friends that I was with to make it over to his place to say hi. So next time I'm up there, I definitely will meet up with him. But it was like, if I hadn't had Ben on my podcast, I wouldn't be texting with him while I'm in Utah trying to hang out. Like, that's a cool thing. Not that, again, I'm not all that, I don't know, impressed. That's the wrong word. I'm impressed by Ben. I'm impressed by a lot of people that I have on the podcast, but I'm not like starstruck by pretty much anyone, especially in the knife world. Like, this is a pretty small pond of people. I think if people allow themselves to get into that space where seeing another human being has the power to get them that worked up or excited, where it's like that big of a reaction, then I would perceive that as some kind of like internal issue that you're having with your own self-image or worth or something like that. Not that I'm perfect, not that I think I'm a big deal or anything like that. But anyway, it would have been very cool to see Ben. And if I didn't have the podcast, I never would have even had the opportunity to like have a conversation with him that would have led to that kind of thing. So that's cool. And I love doing this. But if this was enjoyable in some way, it may happen again that there will be an off week where something goes wrong or somebody cancels or whatever. And then I'm going to do these in that case. And this was fun for me too, to just have a way to like maybe vent about things or talk about things or just like allow my thoughts to be verbalized in a way that I wouldn't normally unless I was doing a specific knife review. And then it's like channeled into that one topic, right? Like this totally opened up any topic that I felt was pertinent right now today. And there were a lot more things I could have talked to. I could have spent a while talking about Liang Ma versus the Fuller Fanatic or whatever, but I don't care about that. So we're not going to talk about that. But anything that's currently going on or just that I find is interesting or whatever. So this could be a fun outlet to do stuff like that. Or maybe even every now and then I can do like a bonus episode where I'll do on the Wednesday, it'll be me and the guest. And then maybe over the weekend or on Friday or something, I'll do a solo one too. I don't know. Let me know. If you've made it this far, also, you're an awesome person. Thank you for listening. But I guess for real, that has been it. This has been episode number 18 with just me this time. So if you're listening to this and don't know where to find me, if you're on YouTube, it'll be linked down below. But if you're not, then on YouTube, it's Bearded Gear. And on Instagram, it's bearded_gear. That's where you can find me. So you can also follow Left Concepts on Instagram. That's where you can get information about my upcoming knife with Ryan. That's just LUFTCONCEPTS, Left Concepts, at Left Concepts on Instagram. It's where you'll find information about that upcoming knife model called the Avant. So thanks, everybody. You guys are awesome. And we'll see you on the next one, I suppose.